On 5:31 PI. Wonderful to be in your company this Tuesday. Would love to hear from you. Pacific Mornings at pmn.co.nz, on our Facebook page 5:31 PI, and on the text machine 531. Now, we've heard of the impact of the drug trade in the Pacific region, but a report suggests a solution to tackle and dismantle organised crime to protect New Zealand and the security of our Pacific neighbours. Steve Symon is the chair of the Ministerial Advisory Group on Transnational Serious and Organised Crime and joins me now to discuss that and much more. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Look, before we even get into the report recommendations, I suppose could we start with painting a picture of how bad transnational crime is and ultimately how it impacts our communities?
It's really bad. It's difficult to put on a scale because um, we don't know enough data to know exactly how bad it is. What we do know is the metrics we have are like things like our wastewater results. We know that New Zealand consumes twice as much methamphetamine as we did last year. We know that 1 out of 10 New Zealanders is the victim of online fraud. We know that there's more and more migrant exploitation happening in New Zealand. And we know that the Pacific has been used as a gateway for a lot of those commodities to come to places like New Zealand and Australia.
Wow.
What's worse about that is it's really bad now, but from talking to other countries like Australia, looking at the UK experience, it could get much worse for us because we're seen as quite a lucrative market. And so organised crime will find its way to get here and exploit New Zealanders and the Pacific.
Look, major drug busts at customs seem to be the norm now. We see it in news headlines, for example. Are these efforts enough to deter drugs from coming into the country?
No. To put it bluntly, I've been a Crown prosecutor for 20 years. I go back old enough to remember some of the first methamphetamine trials where we were getting very excited about 1 kilogram of methamphetamine. Now those shipments are regularly in the hundreds of kilograms. We're seeing those come through Asia. We're seeing them come through from South America through the Pacific. The scale is enormous. The amount of drugs we stopped or customs stopped in an average year last year, 10 years ago, was about the same amount that they stopped in 1 week every week last year.
Wow.
And so we're seeing huge volumes come through. That's not to say that they're not doing a great job. Obviously, what you see from that is customs and the police are stopping more drugs than ever, but it's the scale of the problem overseas that's coming here. So methamphetamine is now being made in super labs in South America and in Asia. So the volumes are just enormous.
Jeepers. I suppose another aspect of this that maybe we don't like to acknowledge so much, I'm talking about the public here, is corruption at key points of business and border control. Is the Pacific especially vulnerable here when those on lower incomes are, promised big payouts?
Very much so. And I think there is a tendency for us to go, hold on, people in those countries, people in New Zealand, people in the Pacific, we're proud countries. We have a lot of honor. We have a lot of mana. And we think, well, look, those people shouldn't be corrupt.
Mm.
But if I can give you an example, on my recent trip to Fiji with Minister Costello, we're meeting with police officers, customs officers, who are earning maybe 20,000 Fijian dollars a year, and they are being offered the same amount to turn a blind eye to a drug importation for one night. Don't go to this place for one night, and we
Wow.
will pay you the same amount of money you earn in an entire year. And so it's very challenging. If you're on the ground, you're meeting the people, you're talking to the people in the islands who are struggling financially. It's very rich of us to say, well, you shouldn't fall into corruption when it's so easy to do.
Mm. And look, here's the big question, inevitably. I mean, is what's the solution here? We're thinking policy reform, ongoing funding, a national response, Pacific response. What is the solution?
It was an interesting job. I mean, I've been doing this a long time,
Mm.
but often in the trenches, doing cases at the front line. So it was interesting to stand back and say, well, what could we do better? The big problem that we have is we do a lot of talk, not as much action, and also we're not coordinated. Like our response to organised crime is spread across some 13 different government ministries. And so that causes a massive problem for us because there's just no coordination, and that's even worse in the Pacific. And so what we've recommended is a way to bring that all together, to coordinate that, to make sure there's accountability, starting with a minister of organised crime so that the public can look and say, this is the person responsible for helping us fight organised crime, and then providing them the resources to do that, both here and in the Pacific.
Yeah. That's an interesting idea, a dedicated minister. Has there been bipartisan support from both sides of the aisle on the political spectrum to stamp down on this, or has there been more talk from both sides?
There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of support. Every everyone is keen to say they are hard on crime, and particularly hard on organised crime. I have to say this: it has been genuine support I've seen from the ministers that I've spoken to. Obviously, we've had lots of conversations with the Minister of Customs, Minister of Police, Minister of Justice, and others, and they've certainly been great. What we're wanting to see is that rhetoric turn into adoption of our recommendations so we can get on and do so.
So basically, there are too many cooks in the kitchen at the moment in terms of you're having to talk to police, you're having to talk to customs, etc.
Yeah, too many cooks, and the cooks focusing on the one thing they do. I mean, if you know, police are making fried chicken, they're making really good fried chicken. If customs are making French fries, they're making really good French fries. The problem is that organized crime goes across all of the different food types.
Right.
It is affecting us in multiple different ways, and there's no one coordinating it. You need a head chef.
Yeah, totally. That's a good analogy. All right. So how do migrant workers factor into, say, illegal drug trade?
Migrant workers are a problem here now.
Mm-hmm.
They We've had 4 times the amount of reporting of migrant exploitation this year as we have in previous years. We see from the Australian experience that it can get much worse for us. In Australia, for example, organised crime controls a lot of the migrant exploited labour force.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to build a construction building in Melbourne, you'll struggle to do so without relying on organised crime because they have got the migrant workforce. In New Zealand, we'll see more and more of it. We've seen it recently happening with the Vietnamese cannabis grow houses, where there was a number of Vietnamese Vietnamese nationals who were in New Zealand when they shouldn't have been, and they came here on promises of legitimate labour and end up having to work in organised crime grow houses.
Cheapers.
And so what we'll see more and more of is organised crime using people as a commodity, because drugs you can sell once, whereas exploited migrants you can sell over and over. And that's a huge problem given the potential for exploitation of migrants here and in the Pacific.
One of the recommendations is to restrict, say, cash remittances to $5,000. Why is that a vulnerable pressure point?
Cash is king when it comes to organised crime. If it's electronic transfers, it's much easier for the authorities to track and to stop that movement of money. Whereas with cash, particularly if you look at exploited migrants, that is a key way that they've been able to achieve the exploitation. They can, have what looks like legitimate businesses, but actually paying people under the table or not paying them enough or bonding them to do work. And in the same way of moving money, illegitimate money from New Zealand overseas, doing so through a repeated number of money transfers is a way to do that. So what we're trying to do is just bring some controls to that. But at the same time, we're trying to balance. Look, we've all got friends and family in the Pacific. People have got to pay for funerals. People have got to pay for weddings. We still want to have a mechanism by which they could do that without allowing the Pacific to be vulnerable to organised crime.
In the report, and I actually like this, in terms of it says, if Cabinet is unable to implement the full structure that's recommended, that a smaller, scaled-back option is a waste of time. Why is that?
Don't do it. I think we have a tendency to say, give me 3 quotes and I'll take the cheapest one.
Yeah.
What we've done is said, look, find a solution. We found a solution and we've said, look, this is the leanest way we can do it. But if you want it to actually work, you just have to invest in it and do it. If you're going to do like a Costco version, no disrespect to Costco, if you're going to do a Costco version, just don't do it at all, because actually you'll give the public the false impression we are doing something when we're not. What will happen is if you do a watered down version, it won't work, and we'll be back here in 5 years, and the problem will be much worse. So for me, for my own credibility, for the ministerial advisory group, we said, look, no, put it up or shut up. Either do this whole resolution or just don't do it.
Yeah. Look, a final question for you. In terms of just throughout this interview, I've learned quite a lot, and it's in some ways confronting. Do you think in that lies a problem with Kiwis, is that we're quite naive when it comes to stuff like this?
Um, yes and no. I mean, yes, we are naive. I think, it's difficult for me. I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen what it's done at the front line, what it's done to our communities. And so I've been passionate about it for a long time. I think New Zealanders need to be educated about the extent of organised crime and what to look for and how it's affecting our communities. Um, but I think that the public are keen to learn. There certainly has been a lot of support from the public. I've been having people email me and call me following interviews like this, and it's amazing to see the response. And I'd say the other thing about it is that Kiwis care, like New Zealanders care. We care about New Zealand, we care about the future we want for our children, and we care about the Pacific because we've had this intrinsic bond. And so there is hope there. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is trying to harness that hope and turn it into a solution for our country and for the Pacific.
Couldn't agree more. Steve Symon is the chair of the Ministerial Advisory Group on Transnational Serious and Organised Crime. Thank you very much for your time. I thoroughly enjoyed your conversation.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
You're listening to Pacific Mornings.